Hey, Caleb here. Good to see you all again. Thanks for joining us here, and we're looking forward to another time together. We're in our series called Reset, and what we're doing is we're looking at how do people throughout the scriptures respond to the disruptions that came to their lives, and then what are some lessons we can learn from them. We also have the opportunity again to hear some worship from Isaac, and again, we were supposed to have a retreat a couple months back, and it was canceled. Isaac was going to lead worship there, so we're really excited that he has continued to take the time to record these songs with Naomi, and we're hoping that as you tune in that you'll be encouraged and that you'll be challenged in how you respond to disruptions.
So let the redeemed of the Lord say so. Sing of His promises evermore, and pour out your thankfulness, and let it overflow. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so. So let the redeemed of the Lord say so. Sing of His promises evermore, and pour out your thankfulness, and let it overflow. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so. Yeah. He led me out of the desert, brought me into His streams, river of living water, and turned my bitter into sweet, and all my burdens are lifted. Took these shackles off my feet. Oh, there's no sound louder than the captain set free. So let the redeemed of the Lord say so. Sing of His promises evermore, and pour out your thankfulness, and let it overflow. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so. There is joy in the morning, springing up in my soul. There is life worth living, 'cause He calls me His own. And there's a hallelujah after sweet victory. Oh, there's no sound louder than the captain set free. Oh, there's no sound louder than the captain set free. So let the redeemed of the Lord say so. Sing of His promises evermore. Pour out your thankfulness, and let it overflow. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so. You are my deliverer, the freedom I'm living in. You are my deliverer, you are my promised land. You are my deliverer, the freedom I'm living in. You are my deliverer, you are my promised land. You are my deliverer, the freedom I'm living in. You are my deliverer, you are my promised land. And you are my deliverer, the freedom I'm living in. And you are my deliverer, you are my promised land. So let the redeemed of the Lord say so. Sing
Oh man, I haven't played Mario Kart in forever. This is so fun. Oh, hey Brayden, don't pull on that, honey. Let's go. Oh, I'm gonna beat you.
No, you're not. I
Probably
played
not.
this so many times growing up. So many hours invested in this game. Oh man, I was just about to beat you in Mario Kart. He hit the game card and it froze.
Yeah, it's okay. We still love you, buddy.
We do. I guess we just need to hit the reset button and try again.
Yeah, it's okay.
Alright, so in our series again called Reset, thanks again to Isaac for singing that song for us, and hope you enjoyed our time together so far. So we're going to be continuing our series called Reset, and what we're talking about is as disruptions come to our lives, a disruption is anything that changes my plans or my circumstances that's out of my control. So as these disruptions come into my life, how do I respond to them? And the theme of our series is called Reset, and the idea is that these circumstances or these disruptions are opportunities for us to hit the reset button, so to speak, and to reset our focus and our priorities back on God. And so far we've seen in our first week together that Joseph was this young man who was sold into slavery. He was thrown into jail on false accusations, and ultimately he became the second in command of all of Egypt. God used him to rescue many, many people. And what we learn from Joseph's life is that we can worship God and help the people around us in the middle of our disruptions. Not once they're over, not once things are all good, but in the middle of them. And then last week we looked at the life of a woman named Rahab. Rahab knew that a major disruption was coming and that it was going to have massive impact on her city and on her people and her family. And knowing that, she recognized that God was at work and she trusted Him. And as a result of that, she was able to become a part of the family of God and a part of the family line that connects her to Jesus. So tonight what we're going to talk about is we're going to continue this series, and we're going to be looking at a guy named Daniel. In fact, Daniel had a few friends with him as well. And so we're going to look at their life, and what we're going to find is that if we are going to be people who respond in worship towards God, and if we're going to be people who trust Him, we need to determine that we are going to honor Him with our lives before disruptions come. Because here's the thing, once a disruption arrives, it can be very difficult to think clearly and to respond appropriately. Think of it this way, as a young man, or as a young boy really, I played baseball. And one of the things that we were taught as baseball players is that we needed to think through our next move before it happened. So if someone hits the ball toward you, you need to have already thought through where the other base runners were, where did you need to throw the ball, and you need to have thought this through ahead of time. Because here's what happens. When the ball is hit to you, all of a sudden, all of these things are happening around you. All this movement is happening. And if you haven't thought through your move, it can be very difficult to make the right call. In fact, it can be so distracting that you make a decision that as you look back, you think it was kind of silly. And so, just like in the game of baseball or softball or in a lot of different games, it's important that if we want to be people who respond appropriately to disruptions, we need to determine ahead of time that we're going to honor God, even if things don't go the way we want them to go. And so we're in the first chapter of Daniel tonight, and what we're going to find from Daniel's life is that we need to determine to serve God before disruptions come. And so as we look at the story of Daniel, we know that his three friends, names that you would recognize, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, we know that they were young men who lived in the kingdom of Judea. And we know that the King Nebuchadnezzar and his army from Babylon came and they besieged the city of Judah, which means they surrounded it and they weren't allowing people in and out. And ultimately they defeated this city. And once the city was defeated, Daniel and his friends were taken from their home, they were taken from their community, taken from their families, and they were taken back to the land of Babylon. And the reason for this is King Nebuchadnezzar wanted certain young men to be trained to become his advisors and his counselors. And so we find that in their story that a part of the training of becoming a counselor or advisor of King Nebuchadnezzar was that they were required to eat and drink certain things. And so in the story, they were required to eat meat and they were required to drink wine. But Daniel and his friends, out of a desire to honor God, they refused this diet. And we know that one of their supervisor, who was overseeing them in their training, agreed to a 10-day trial to see if their diet of vegetables and water was going to be better than the other diet of meat and wine. And what we find over those 10 days is that Daniel and his friends turn out to be the most fit and the most well-off after they ate their diet for those 10 days. And here's the result of this. They chose ahead of time that they were going to honor God even in what they ate and drank, and because of this, these 4 young men become very influential in the kingdom of Babylon. They become advisors and counselors to the king. In fact, we know that Daniel served in the very court of the king of Babylon. And here's what chapter 1, verse 20 says about these guys. And in every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters that were in all his kingdom. And so these 4 young men who had been taken from their home, they become extremely valuable advisors to the very person who removed them from their home. And so the question that I think we have to think about tonight is, how is it that Daniel and his friends were able to be faithful to God and yet become very influential in this situation? And what I want us to do is look at Daniel chapter 1 verse 8, and I think this is where we'll find our answer. And here's the main point. Daniel determined ahead of time to honor God. He had made a determination, he had made a choice ahead of time that he was going to honor God. Daniel chapter 1 verse 8 says this, "But Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food or with the wine that he drank. Therefore he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him not to defile himself." And I love this word in verse 8, that he resolved. And that's where we're getting our word determined. This indicates that Daniel had taken the time to thoughtfully make the decision before the disruption came. You know, we've talked about this in the past, that there's this idea of being proactive. Being proactive is the belief that I have the responsibility for how I act. And when we're proactive, we think through our decisions and we try to make sure that they bring the appropriate ends that we want. But the person who's reactive, they make choices based on the circumstances around them. Daniel predetermined, pre-chose how he would react when he was faced with the disruptions that would come in Babylon. And because of that, he was able to make a choice that honored God. And not only did it honor God, but then God blessed that, and it actually helped the whole kingdom of Babylon. And so what we find is disruptions will come into our lives, just as they came to Daniel's life. And if you and I are proactive, if we take the time now to determine or to choose that what we do and say we want it to honor God, then as these disruptions come, we're going to be able to make the right choices, and we're going to be able to honor God through those choices. But if we wait, and if we aren't thinking through things ahead of time, if we don't have this resolve that we're going to honor God no matter what comes, then it's going to be very difficult, just like in the game of baseball, when that ball is hit to you. If you haven't thought through what you're going to do next, you might find yourself making choices that you'll regret later. And so as we think about just what do we take away from this, what are some things that we can think about here? And the thing that's very important for us is that these 4 young men they will show us over and over again throughout this book what it looks like to make choices that honor God, because they're faced with disruption after disruption. And what we need to understand here is that you and I cannot control the disruptions that come into our lives. We can't control what circumstances happen. We can't control how we get through those circumstances. But what we can do is we can control how we respond. And Daniel couldn't control the fact that he got taken from his homeland, but he was able to control and to plan out how he would respond as a result of those things. And so you and I, as people, you and I have the important responsibility of, do I have the resolve and have I made the choice that I'm going to trust God and that I'm going to honor Him even if disruptions come into my life that I don't like? And here's how we do this, and here's our bottom line again. We make the determination, we make the choice that we're going to serve and we're going to honor God no matter what comes. And I think that if we are willing to have this resolve and make this choice before the difficult situations come, we'll be far more effective in making choices that honor God when they come. Thanks again for joining, and we'll look forward to hearing some of your feedback from our time together. Hey, thanks again for joining us. We hope that you were encouraged by tonight's message, and we really hope that you will take the intentional steps to determine that you're going to honor God no matter what disruptions come your way. And we're excited to connect further in small group via Zoom, so we'll see you over there.